Welcome back with a smiling face. Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Edge of Tomorrow. Episode 8. Chapter 65. I woke up that morning feeling the best I had in a long time. The weight that had been firmly pressed against my chest for years now, had all but vanished. I couldn't shake the feeling of total security, acceptance, and awe as I slept in the arms of the twins. I marveled at their beautiful faces, how strong their jaws were and how every little scar seemed to enhance their feral beauty. I found myself in constant awe around the two of them. Two men, so large and dominant but had treated me with a gentleness I never knew. Their touches were feather-light, their kisses even lighter. The only time they mixed pleasure and pain was when I begged for it. That morning I found myself sandwiched between the two of them, wondering how life could ever get better than this. Melissa had often spoke of S** X as a act. The first time is the best it's going to get. It all goes downhill from there. The few times Melissa drank alcohol, she went off on one of her tangents. How wrong she had been. Every touch it set my body aflame. It took us an hour longer to get out of bed that morning, but every second had been worth it. As I walked with Alec and Cade to the car, every little movement made the sensitive spot between my legs ache. I wasn't sure I'd ever get used to having the two of them, and savored the soreness that reminded me of last night. I had meant to ask about marking last night, but found myself swept away in Cade's touches. Tori told me it would hurt, and I couldn't help but feel the act was much more significant than I was willing to understand. Tying myself indefinitely to Alec and Cade no longer felt like a huge decision to make. I knew what I wanted, and a life without the twins wasn't a life at all. There was no longer a decision to be made. I was all in, no matter what came our way. Alec and Cade had talked to me that morning regarding my safety in this pack. The two of them thought it best that their betas knew what I was. They had both asked for my opinion beforehand, not daring to say anything without my permission. The choice caught me off guard. I wasn't used to anyone asking my opinion, asking what I wanted. They both knew I'd have to shift eventually, and I was beginning to agree with them. Shifting into a wolf wasn't something I had been excited for. Now, it was the oxygen I breathed. I couldn't imagine anything more freeing than shedding my human skin. The dull thud of the earth beneath my paws, the way the scents and sights of the forest all seemed to change and heighten. It was thrilling and intoxicating. Despite my initial fear over what I was, Thalia had become a close part of me. Her frustration and anxiety became my own. Alec and Cade insisted that their betas would be able to accompany me on runs when they couldn't. Even though I had never met the two betas, I could see how much Alec and Cade trusted them. I decided to do the same. Jason and Zane were not what I had expected. While Cade comes off broodier and more silent, even Alec could be a man of few words. Jason and Zane were a whirlwind of excitement, charisma, and perfect teeth. Sharp jawlines, lopsided grins, and lush hair all wrapped in a 6'4" package. Neither one was mated, as they had complained multiple times about how lucky Alec and Cade were. "Your eyes look badass." Jason grinned, brushing back a couple strands of his CH3STNUT hair, which had fallen in his face. His hazel eyes darted back and forth between my own. "I bet you're one tough little wolf. One blue eye, one brown." I glanced over at Alec, who snorted at Jason's comment. Cade cleared his throat and the two betas quickly collapsed in silence. I had to give it to Jason and Zane. They could be immature and somewhat rambunctious, but neither one dared disrespect Alec or Cade. It was a strange friendship, one based on trust and loyalty. Similar to the friendship I had with Tori, though she's proved time and time again that she isn't afraid of putting me in my place. Speaking of her wolf, there's something you should know. Alec grimaced before clearing his throat. You'll repeat this to no one. Understood? Yes, Alpha. Both Jason and Zane nodded, their humor snuffed out by the severity of Alec's tone. Claire is a white wolf. No one else can know, at least not right now. Cade chimed in, crossing his arms over his chest. During instances where Alec and I might be busy, we expect you to accompany Claire when she wants to shift. You'll have the complete schedule of all parole shifts, and know what areas to avoid. Jason and Zane were quiet for a few moments, and both sets of surprised eyes were on me. Just when I thought Alec or Cade might say something, Jason chimed in with a hearty laugh. Told ya. Jason snickered. Good guess. Zane mumbled, begrudgingly handing over a $50 bill to Jason. You guessed that Claire was a white wolf, and proceeded to bet each other on it. Alec asked, his face hard though his eyes twinkled with a hint of amusement. Oh, no. Zane shook his head and flashed me a lopsided grin. I didn't guess she was a white wolf, just guessed she was special. What made you think I was special? I asked, resisting to snort. While I had accepted Alec and Cade, this entire world was still so new to me. I still found it incredible that I could change my form into a wolf. I couldn't understand how the people in this pack were so used to shifting forms. The feeling in itself was incredible, despite the pain. You have two mates. That's never happened before. Zane shrugged, and flashed a smirk at Alec and Cade. Besides, usually mates are pretty evenly matched. But you're a white wolf, which makes you stronger than Alec and Cade. We'll keep her secret, Alpha. Jason nodded to Alec and Cade, looking just a hint more serious than Zane did. No one will know until you're all ready. Good, appreciated. Cade nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Are you both prepared for what'll happen after the pack knows? Jason frowned, giving me a brief look of concern. I had a vague idea on what would happen once the entire pack knew. Alec, Cade, and Sage all told me how coveted white wolves were and how they had always been in short supply. I wouldn't be surprised if the pack experienced a heightened number of attacks after my reveal. The thought filled me with overwhelming guilt, but I had no other option but to trust Alec and Cade. Both were so sure their pack would accept me, but I couldn't help holding some doubts. None of these people knew me, and Alec and Cade just expected them to accept me as their ruler? A ruler who brings nothing but danger. Regardless, all I could do was stay and try to minimize the damage. Running was no longer an option, and I was determined to face this future mess head-on. We're prepared. Alec nodded, the muscles in his CH-3ST and arms coiled. I could feel the fierce protectiveness radiating from both Alec and Cade, as well as Jason and Zane's concern. Perhaps Alec and Cade were right, maybe the people of this pack would accept me. Jason and Zane both had taken to me right away, bowing with big flourishes as they called me Luna every 2 seconds. Good. Because once word gets out, everyone's going to want a piece of your mate. Zane frowned, the worry lines on his face grew deeper as Alec's quiet snarl rang out into the air. I stayed behind with Jason and Zane as the twins went and visited Garrett and Julian. I wasn't too keen on seeing them again, especially after the bombs Julian dropped. Alec and Cade's reassuring presence were the only thing holding me together at the moment. The two of them were so strong, so selflessly brave that it made me want to step up to the plate. The thought of running the biggest pack in the United States sent my heart hammering and my pulse skyrocketing, but I trusted Alec and Cade to see me through it all. After getting over the initial shock, Alec and Cade's parents were both supportive. I had an entire support system, one not related by BL00D but chosen. It was the only family I've ever had, and the only one I might ever need. Eventually, Tori stopped by. Jason and Zane had given me a brief rundown of what my duties as Luna would entail. The quick explanation of the twins' duties had my head throbbing. The two of them oversaw so much in this pack. They looked after the townspeople, made treaties with other packs, trained warriors, defended the perimeters from the occasional rogue attacks, and made sure money went to all the right places. What made me the happiest was the fact that there were no specific duties as Luna. I could help Alec and Cade with just about anything. My gender gave me no restrictions on ruling, and I held the same command and respect as the twins. It solidified my loyalty to the twins and this pack even more. Tori seemed to be the only person, other than Alec and Cade, able to calm both Jason and Zane down. The two of them were hyperactive bundles of caffeine and adrenaline. With a few sharp words, she had Jason and Zane quiet and obedient. They grumbled under their breath quite a bit, but I was beginning to realize there was no one in this town who didn't like Tori. Jason and Zane were not the exception. Alec and Cade returned home once the sun sank into the sky and the moon arrived at full force. I had draped myself across our large bed after putting all of my clothes away. Alec and Cade's mom had gone shopping for me, picking me out a few outfits of my own. Her style was a little more formal than mine, but all of the outfits she had chosen were wonderful and comfortable. Even the thigh-high dresses were soft and fit perfectly. Alec launched himself forward as he caught me lying on the bed. My giggle turned into a little wheeze as Alec shifted on top of me. Once he fully supported his body weight, I returned the lopsided smile he flashed my way. "Hello, beautiful," Alec murmured, planting at least a dozen kisses to my face and neck. He buried his nose in my hair and I laughed as his breath fanned out over my neck. "You smell so good, I missed you. It's only been a few hours," I teased, though I felt the same way. Even a few hours without the twins had been noticeable. They were my source of strength, laughter, joy, and compassion. They were everything I wanted to be, and my way of getting there. Even as I teased Alec, I couldn't help but wrap my arms around him and breathe in his delicious scent. The bed shifted beside me and I yelped as Cade jumped on the bed. For the second time today, I found myself sandwiched between the twins. This time around, we had clothes on. It wasn't an improvement in my mind, and I found myself toying with the hem of Alec's shirt. "Patience, sweetheart," Cade chuckled lowly. A heavy shiver worked its way through my body as Cade's tongue darted out and slid against the soft skin of my neck. His deep grumble of approval was the only response I received. "As much as we'd love to tear your clothes off and take you, we have something else planned." "Something else?" I asked, lifting my head to look between the two of them. Both smirked at the slight whine in my voice and pulled me from the bed. I was told to change into something comfortable. After slipping on a t-shirt and a pair of cotton sweat, I followed Alec and Cade outside. Night was fully upon us, making the sky dark with shades of navy blue and indigo. The moon and the bright spattering of stars that danced in the sky were our only sources of light. I found myself taking deep breaths of the crisp air, enjoying the tang of humidity on my skin. I could feel Thalia stir and stretch within the confines of my mind. Anytime I was outside, I had to shed my skin. I wanted to bound off into the forest, letting my instincts run wild while I stepped down. Giving yourself over completely was freeing in a way I could have never imagined. I couldn't conceal my excitement as Alec and Cade lead us into the woods. "Let's make this a little more interesting," Cade murmured, spinning around to face me. I could make out very little from where we stood. We were deep in the woods, not on any discernible trail. Little leaves from nearby bushes and trees tickled my skin. Through the beams of moonlight penetrating the thick forest, I could make out Cade's face. In his hands were a little scrap of black fabric. My eyes widened as I realized what Cade wanted to do, making his smirk deepen even more. "Do you trust us, sweetheart?" Cade asked, circling around until he stood at my back. I shivered as his rough fingers danced along the back of my neck, brushing my long hair to one side. "I trust you both." I nodded, my words coming out weak and breathless. "Good." Cade smirked. He tied the blindfold around my eyes, checking to make sure I couldn't see anything. I instinctively leaned back into his touch. My bottom grazed against the tightness in his jeans, and I had to physically pull my mind from the gutter. "Let Alec lead you. I'll be behind you the entire time." I followed behind Alec for what felt like an hour. As Alec stopped, I nearly slammed into his back. Cade's hands steadied me before I nearly toppled over. "Can I take this off now?" I asked, already reaching for the scratchy blindfold. "Not yet, doll." Alec's voice was low and smooth. A hand wrapped around my wrist, and I instinctively knew it was Alec. He moved my hand back down to my side before scooping me into his arms. Despite how at ease I felt with the two of them, I couldn't help but be a little nervous. "I think you should leave it on, sweetheart." Cade purred, "for now, at least." Chapter 66. I could hear the light trickle of water all around us and smell the fresh scent of damp earth. On the cool breeze, I could make out the gentle and sweet aroma of wild flowers. My attention was quickly captured by the twins. "We're going to be doing this for a very, very long time." Alec's words helped ease some of my self-consciousness. It was only natural to be aware of one's flaws, especially in the presence of two equally perfect men. I seemed to have to remind myself that they were both my mates, that this was permanent. They would never tire of me, never abandon me for something better. For them, there was nothing better than me. I felt the same about them, but still found it hard to accept their unmoving presence in my life. After being left to fend for myself for so long, having a support system of my own was entirely new. Regardless, I savored every gentle and consuming emotion that radiated from the twins. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Cade asked. "Stop holding back." I muttered breathlessly, "Both of you stop holding back. I want it all, exactly how you are. I won't break, I promise." Chapter 67. "I want to watch you swallow my cum, sweetheart." Cade murmured, brushing his fingers beneath my chin. His eyes seemed to darken as my throat worked, swallowing his load completely. The three of us collapsed onto the blanket they placed in the clearing. It was then that I looked around and audibly gasped. I was surprised at how accurate my senses had been. We were in a large clearing. There were speckles of wild flowers growing in clumps around the circular field. A thick stream worked its way through the clearing. A large pile of rocks sat to the side of the stream, acting as a miniature waterfall. What surprised me most were the twinkling lights that hung from the trees. There were a few lanterns scattered about, casting fiery light along the dark forest floor. "You guys did this?" I asked, my voice quiet and weak. The little bloom of love in their CH3STS were the only answer I needed. I blinked back the tears that stung my eyes, unable to fathom why anyone would do something like this for me. "You're our mate," Alec murmured, pulling me into his warm embrace. He wiped at the stray tear that managed to escape my eye. "It's so much more than just a title. You were made for us, just as we were made for you. You are the most important thing to us, sweetheart," Cade murmured from behind me, his strong hands rubbing at my shoulders and back. "More important than our family, our pack. You are the only thing that matters." I wasn't sure how long I laid there, wrapped in their embraces and smothered by their overwhelming emotions. I had never felt so relaxed, so happy in my entire life. This was everything I'd ever need. No matter what troubles lie ahead, I would face them all for another moment like this. An hour or so must have passed before we all finally stirred. I hadn't even realized how bare I was compared to the two of them. Completely exposed as I let them hold and caress me. I could feel a heavy blush stain my cheeks, but couldn't bring myself to move. "Now, let's get down to why we brought you here," Alec chuckled, pulling me to my feet. "So, you didn't just bring me here to have S*X with me?" I teased, chuckling at the two of them. "No, but if I have to see you for another minute I'm not sure I'll be able to control myself." Cade grunted, his eyes darting down my body before returning to my face. "We brought you here to shift," Alec chimed in, unable to help himself as his eyes trailed down my exposed body. At Alec's words, Thalia roared to life. She had been giving me time alone with the twins, to develop my own emotions and feelings towards the two of them. She had been growing antsy for some time now, and was trying not to beg me for a chance to run. At the first opportunity, her self-imposed silence flew right out the window. Thalia would love that very much. I snorted, trying not to nod too enthusiastically. "You've only shifted that once, so it's still going to hurt." Cade frowned, "As your mates, we can ease the pain quite a bit." "Well, I'm not entirely sure how I shifted the first time." I frowned, shifting my weight as I tried not to blush. The cool wind coursing through the clearing was grazing against my bare skin, spreading the already heady scent of my arousal. I pushed the thoughts from my mind, determined to give Thalia some freedom before waltzing back into the twins' bed. I kind of just panicked and did it. "We can help you learn to shift," Alec assured me. Close just as the word left Cade's P.S., both of the twins stiffened. Their eyes glazed over, as I had seen many times in the past. Someone was mind-linking them. It had happened quite a bit in the past, mostly by Jason and Zane. The gentle emotions that radiated from them came to an abrupt halt. Rage, anger, worry, and fierce protectiveness throbbed through their very pores. I found myself flinching as the emotions washed over me. The depth of their anger was fathomless, like a bloodthirsty monster locked in a flimsy cage. "Shit," Cade hissed, his burning eyes meeting Alec's. "I'll wait with Claire," Alec replied, his words coming out fast and angry. "Have Jason and Zane meet us here. I'll catch up once she's safe." "All right." Cade grunted, his eyes flickering over to me before returning to his brother. "Make sure they know, anything happens to her and they're dead." "They already know," Alec snapped, "now go." Before I could open my mouth to speak, Cade had me wrapped in his arms. I let out a quiet breath as his arms gripped me tightly. He pressed against mine in a heated kiss, one I hadn't experienced before. Desperation, fear, worry, rage, and protectiveness all wrapped into one mind-shattering kiss. I didn't like the feeling, I didn't like how I felt, all too similar to a goodbye. "What's happening?" I asked somewhat shrilly, watching Cade bound off into the forest. "There's been an attack, a big one," Alec grimaced, pulling me into his CH3ST. His words were low and soothing, but did nothing to wipe the fear from every corner of my mind. "Jason and Zane are coming, they'll take you to one of our safe houses. We're getting you far from this fight, Claire. But you and Cade will survive, doll." Alec murmured, brushing my hair back from my face. We've trained for this since we could walk. Our dad might not look like it now, but he's one of the best warriors to walk the earth. We can handle this, but we cannot have you anywhere close to the fighting. He slipped the shirt he was wearing off and pulled it over my head. After helping me slip my sweatpants on, I was pulled back into his arms. I wanted to shout, to tear myself away from his grasp and plead. I could help, I know I could, but Alec was right. What if I found myself in danger? What if something happened to them because they were trying to protect me? I couldn't live with myself if something happened to either of them. It wasn't about having two mates. It was the fact that both of them held a piece of my soul. I needed them both, not one, but both. Alec pulled me in for the same mind-shattering KSS as Cade had. I savored the taste of him, unwilling to give voice to the raging storm of fear that churned in my gut. The night had been perfect, so perfect, but ended in cataclysmic horror. I wouldn't lose them, not tonight. I repeated this in my head like a mantra, but was unable to stifle the sheer anxiety I felt. Jason and Zane bounded into the clearing on all fours, tongues lolled out to the side in a heavy pant. If I shift, I can run faster. I exhaled, running my eyes over the two wolves. Jason was the color of sand, with flecks of chocolate fur. Zane was pure silver, much like his human eye color. They were both easily the size of bears, making me remember when I had first seen Alec and Cade in wolf form. It was still awe-inspiring, seeing these huge creatures with the soul of both wolf and human. Shifting would allow you to travel faster, but we can't risk it. Alec shook his head, you're safer in human form. As much as I'm going to hate this, I need you to climb on Jason's back. Jason's wolf let out a low grumble which seemed to be a suitable response. Alec flashed a grateful look towards Jason before grabbing me and lifting me up. Once I was settled on Jason's back, his thick fur between my fingers, Alec gave me one last heated look. The look held the emotions of both Alec and Cade. The lengths they were willing to go for me, and how truly motivated they were to come back to me. I watched with halted breath as Alec shifted and bounded off into the forest. Jason and Zane followed quickly after, heading in the opposite direction. My stomach was now a mess of nerves and unease. Every jolt, bump, or tremor that I felt made my stomach turn. Jason did what he could to avoid any stray branches hanging from the trees, but I couldn't feel the sting against my skin anyway. Nearly half an hour passed before I felt it. A dull stinging in the back of my mind, radiating to my temples and down my ch3st. All of a sudden, the stinging increased in intensity, racking my body with wave after wave of unfathomable pain. Something's wrong. My voice came out in a wheeze, ripping through the dull thud of paws hitting the earth. Alec. Cade. Fear so strong I couldn't stand it coursed through me. It was the kind of overwhelming fear that led to horrible acts of desperation. I would do anything to erase that fear from my ch3st. As soon as the fear racked my body, I let go of Jason's fur. I twisted my body, flinging myself from his back without a single care. Rocks and jagged twists dug into my skin, some drawing blood. I could feel the sticky liquid trickle down my split lip. Just as Jason and Zane skidded to a halt, I was on my feet. The two of them were bounding after me, racing through the woods to help their fallen Luna. Fear and desperation had helped me shift once, and it would do so again. I closed my eyes and felt my human self slipping away. I yanked Thalia to the front of my mind, and it took very little convincing for her to take control. The pain that exploded beneath my skin was nothing compared to the agony and fear I felt from all corners of my mind. The connection I had with Alec and Cade, even without the mark, was making itself known. I wasn't sure how I knew, but something had gone wrong. A flash of white settled behind my eyes, and when I opened them, I was settled on 4 paws. Jason and Zane both hesitated for a moment, feeling surprise and awe at seeing a white wolf in the flesh. I used their surprise to my advantage, bounding off into the forest. I hadn't a single clue where I was going, but that didn't matter. I relied on my senses to carry me to the twins, letting their emotion guide me like a brightly lit thread. As I drew closer and closer, the pain and fear increased. As I tore myself from the forest line, I knew one of them had been hurt. Chapter 68. Don't stop, don't stop. I chanted this in my head like a mantra, using it to chase away the overwhelming terror I felt. As I tore through the forest, I could hear the snarls and snaps of nearby wolves. There was also a thick copper scent in the air, and I didn't need to ask to know what it was. I was petrified, terrified enough to bolt far from this town and never return. It was Alec and Kate who kept me here, who kept me running towards the danger instead of away. Pain radiated through my torso, so strong I would have thought I had been wounded. The pain coupled with the thought of one of the twins hurt kept me running. It kept me charging forward, unable to feel the aching, gnawing pain in my limbs and muscles. That brief feeling of total freedom when shifting had passed, suppressed by the terror and desperation I felt. It was in this moment that I realized a mate bond was as much of a weakness as it was a strength. There was nothing I wouldn't do to end this, to have both of the twins safe with me. It was a horrifying, disgusting thought. I was willing to risk innocent lives, people I had become friends with, just to keep 2 people safe. I would set fire to the world if it meant keeping the twins safe and alive, and that thought absolutely horrified me. I could hear snapping and snarling from a few feet behind me, and knew Jason and Zane were catching up. Alec and Kate had briefly gone over some ceremony the pack would be holding for me. It would connect my mind with everyone else's, allowing me to speak to anyone in the pack at any time. They had put off the ceremony in order to give me more time to adjust, and I was beginning to regret that decision. I couldn't call out to them, couldn't hear their voices. I needed to hear them, I needed it more than I could fathom. One word, one sign that they were safe, and I would retreat and hide. As it stood, I wasn't thinking about the consequences of what I might do. All I was thinking about were Alec and Kate. I didn't care about being a white wolf, or having abilities. What good did it do if I couldn't protect the people who meant most to me? A dull pain radiated up my hind leg, and I quickly turned my head to see Jason lunging at me. I could sense their emotions as if they were my own, and I knew they weren't trying to harm me. They were both terrified something would happen to me, their Luna. They were also fiercely protective, and I silently apologized for what I'd do next. I gathered what strength I had, thankful that for once, Thalia was completely on board with what I was thinking. She felt that same blood-curdling desperation as I, that horrifying willingness to do whatever it took to keep Alec and Kate safe. I launched forward, using the combined strength of Thalia and I. Desperation and fear could do wonders. It can drive people to commit unspeakable acts, or even incredible ones. Just as Jason lunged at my hind leg a second time, I darted to the side and sent him careening into the nearest tree. Zane was next, picking up speed as he tried to run at my side. Just as Zane lunged at my side, I skidded to a near stop. Zane rolled, nearly taking out an old telephone pole. It wasn't much, but it allowed me just enough time to get ahead. I wasn't far from the twins' house, just a few minutes down the main road. My eyes darted around hungrily as I charged down Main St. I passed the countless shops I had once wandered through, and noticed how the entire town seemed deserted. There wasn't a person in sight. Cars were abandoned in various locations, some were even stopped at the nearest red light. Soon the shops disappeared and gave way to residential buildings and houses. I could have sworn I saw a few lights on in some of the houses, but I couldn't be sure. I knew Alec and Cade must have had some kind of safety plan in order, just in case something like this happened. They had once told me rogue attacks happened every so often, and I hoped this was one of those moments. Fear twisted itself in my gut like a knife as the sounds of battle grew louder. The only kinds of battles I've seen were the ones in movies, the battles where you could tell who was the enemy and who was your ally. Those battles always seemed so cut and dry. A great hero would march in and tip the tides, scoring a win for their side. I darted towards the end of the road, making a sharp right into the less populated side of town. Most of the land on this side of town was in the midst of construction. Families in the pack were growing, and there had been a lot of transfers lately. There was even a school being built on this side of town. As I veered right down the street, I managed to glance behind me and saw Jason and Zane a good bit away. Just as I turned, I could see the battle raging ahead. I stammered for a moment, nearly halting before instinct and desperation forced me forward. This was nothing like the movies, nothing like I had ever anticipated. There were wolves everywhere. Snapping, snarling, foaming at the mouth. Blood splatter filled the air. Chunks of flesh and fur littered the ground with the dead bodies of countless wolves. I couldn't tell who was a rogue, and who belonged to this pack. My eyes darted from wolf after wolf, never once finding what I was looking for. I knew what Alec and Cade looked like in wolf form, but there were simply too many wolves fighting. The few cars that lined the road were all but destroyed. Shards of glittering glass littered the ground, along with various metal parts. A work truck that had been parked at the corner was nearly flattened, and I watched in abject horror as a sand-colored wolf was tossed onto the dented hood. The windshield cracked and groaned under the weight before giving in entirely. In between the snarls and howling, I could make out the warbled groaning of a car alarm. Off to the side of the road was the shell of what would soon be a house. The beams had collapsed completely, sending a dust cloud whirling into the air. I could taste the dirt on my tongue just as I could smell the blood, filth, and saliva. A thick, sickly stench filled the air. Like a large number of people hadn't showered in years. It smelled like sweat, bodily fluids, rotting flesh, and old trash. I couldn't pinpoint the smell as it seemed to come from every direction. Even as the desperation and fear threatened to rob me of breath, I never once stopped. I didn't hesitate as I charged into battle, only then remembering I hadn't a single clue how to defend myself. The emotions were nearly crippling. They attacked me even though none of the wolves turned my way. Anger, hatred, fear, desperation, agony, pain, longing, loss, love. So many emotions, all with their own distinct flavor. They assaulted my mind, peeled back the layers of my flesh until there was nothing left but my soul. I had experienced plenty of physical pain in my life, and knew I had a decent pain tolerance. Physical pain was nothing compared to the soul-deep agony I was experiencing. It radiated through every bone, joint, muscle and cell until I was nothing but a pile of ash. My breaths came out in wheezing pants, and my gait faltered for just that split second. "Control it, Claire!" Thalia snapped. I had never heard her this way. Demanding and forceful, giving me no room for error or mistake. "Get your shit together. Do it for Alec and Cade. Figure out how to use their emotions to make you stronger." Easier said than done, I thought, but managed to continue anyway. I let Thalia take complete control, using every ounce of my focus to shove those horribly overwhelming emotions deep down. It gave me a few minutes of clarity, but it was too late to realize the mistake I had made. Claire, get back here. Thalia's voice was low, and I knew something had gone wrong. As I slipped back into my senses, I realized what had happened. We had been noticed. Not just by a select few, but by everyone. Hundreds of eyes turned in our direction, and nearly all of the fighting had completely halted. Every single wolf was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. Some were waiting for me to act, to use whatever proclaimed powers I would have as a white wolf. If only they knew, I laughed bitterly. All I could do was sense emotions. Completely useless in battle, if anything it was a hindrance. 5 long seconds passed before everyone realized there was nothing I could do. The fighting was back in full force, and the sudden sound of snapping and snarling sounded like war cannons in my ears. This was different though. The fighting had changed. I could now pinpoint a few of the rogues. Their eyes burned with a crazed light, and their fur looked dirty and unwashed. It was also longer and shaggier than the other wolves, who I assumed were in our pack. Many of those crazed eyes were on me, as they had never left. I had made myself a target. My white fur seemed to capture the rays of the moon, nearly glowing in the darkness. I was a beacon to the good and the bad, and everyone wanted a piece. I was no longer the one rescuing. I was the one in need of rescue. Everywhere I turned, a new rogue charged at me. None harmed me, but they were all hell-bent on taking me down. I thanked whoever was listening for my above-average speed and stealth as I maneuvered through wolf after wolf. I dipped and rolled, charged and retreated as I worked my way through the massive battlefield. Just as I evaded a rogue with long auburn hair, something hard slammed into my side. A yelp left my muzzle and I thundered towards the ground. Dirt and grass flew into the air from the impact, and I somehow managed to turn on my belly as I looked straight into the mouth of one of the rogues. Saliva dribbled from its open mouth, and I stifled a gag as rancid breath fanned over my face. Its long tongue came out, swiping over its snout before stalking towards me. They didn't want to kill me, I realized. They wanted to capture me. Not a single rogue had made an attempt to kill me, only to knock me to the ground or render me unconscious. Were white wolves truly that rare that anyone might want one? Or was there a purpose to this battle? Was this because of me? My desperate prayers were answered when a rush of fierce protectiveness washed through me. It destroyed every barrier I erected around myself, and the emotions of every single wolf rushed forward at full force. I was consumed in the agony and pain of my surroundings, drowning in the fear and desperation. I was a rogue attacking the innocent, bloodthirsty, and desperate for death. I was a warrior, terrified for my life and my family's. I was a friend, a sister, brother, enemy, lover. I was on both sides, yet neither. Surrounded by carnage, and engulfed within it. It was the towering form of a midnight black wolf that pulled me from my own confusion. Dark eyes stared down at me, burning with a raging fire that made unease settled beneath my skin. "Oh, he's pissed," were Thalia's only words. I watched from my place on the ground as Cade knocked the rogue off its feet. I felt my stomach sour and bile rise up in my throat as his long teeth sunk into the flesh of the rogue. Pain exploded across my neck and shoulder, and I swore I was dying along with the putrid rogue. I could feel each spurt of blood as if it were my own, and knew the exact moment the rogue had departed the land of the living. Cade gripped my scruff gently, pulling me to my feet. I wobbled for a few moments, but quickly regained my awareness. Cade had saved me, but it wasn't enough. We were losing this battle. There were so many dead along the field, so many lives lost. A painful ache settled across my chest as I hoped this fight wasn't because of me. How could I live with myself knowing this was my fault? I tried to push the feelings away, chalking it up to an inflated sense of self-importance, but the pain refused to budge. The rogues were closing in on us now, circling around Cade and I with hungry eyes. Countless wolves put themselves in between Cade and the rogues, protecting him with their life. Just as a golden wolf with blood-matted fur leaped towards me, a second midnight wolf came into view. Relief, pure and sweet, burst through my chest. Where Alec should have been able to take down the rogue with ease, it had taken him a few moments to gain the upper hand. I realized why as soon as I trailed my eyes over his wolf's body. Blood matted in the fur along his hip and thigh. I could make out the jagged punctures in his thick skin, and winced as I saw the fresh blood still oozing from the wound. It hadn't surprised me that Alec would refuse to retreat. They were both horrifically stubborn, both loyal and honorable to a fault. There wasn't a chance they would leave their pack to fend for themselves. They would fight to the bitter end for these people, and I was beginning to realize that I'd do the same. I could feel the twins' pain with every life lost, but never once did I sense fear from them. They were not afraid of the violence, just as they weren't afraid of death. It was the twins who gave me courage to face the ugly, disgusting emotions that ate away at my soul. I gathered every thought, every emotion in my mind. All of my fear, desperation, anxiety, horror, hatred, anger, love. I took it all and let it fester within me. The burst of energy that coursed through me was so intense, I let out an earth-shattering howl. My howl filled the night, echoed along the trees and delved deep into the forest. Every inch of my body filled with this unfathomable feeling. It felt like I had touched a live wire, like I was being electrocuted. All of those ugly emotions exploded from within me, washing over the blood-soaked battlefield. Everything seemed to happen all at once. Nearly every single rogue dropped to the ground. Howls, whimpers, and yelps of absolute terror filled the air. It sounded like an entire battlefield of dying animals, all screaming out into the night, voicing their unending agony. The feeling was intoxicating, completely consuming. The emotions poured from me, coming from a deep well that knew no end. I lashed out at every single one of them, infusing my own pain and fear into the mix. I let them taste it all. I let them feel the pain and terror of the warriors they killed, the mourning their families would go through and the heartbreak their mates would experience. Many of the rogues writhed on the ground, while others retreated into the forest completely. Some were lashing out at themselves, doing anything and everything they could to end their own lives. I was caught in this power-fueled haze when the sound of hundreds of wolves howling filled the air. It was different from how the rogues had sounded. These wolves sounded united, full of life and purpose. "Sweetheart, can you hear us? We need you to stop, doll. Stop what you're doing and come back to us." It was the voices of Alec and Cade that pulled me from the well of emotions I had submerged myself in. It was like a wall had been erected within me, placed there for so long that I hadn't even noticed its presence. That wall was obliterated now, completely dismantled into the smallest shreds of rubble. On the other side of that wall was power, pure and unfiltered. It was neither good nor evil, but held the potential for incredible greatness. A power that could end wars and conquer countless civilizations. As Alec and Cade pulled me away from the sea of power that held me firmly in its grasp, I felt overwhelming fatigue settle in my bones. The well of emotions within me had run dry, leaving me dazed and confused. I couldn't pinpoint my own emotions, much less anyone else's. The world around me pitched and swayed, the blood-soaked earth loomed uncomfortably close. The last thing I felt before the moon vanished and darkness consumed me, was the comforting sparks that danced along my body. Chapter 69. You two were supposed to protect her. Garrett's voice, sharp with rage, jostled me awake. What did you expect us to do? Alex snarled, "You might have tied her up and locked her away, but we'd never. We protected her with everything we had, which is more than you've ever done." "Yes. I would have locked her away, boy," Garrett all but shouted. The anger in his voice ebbed and flowed, and I found myself listening intently when his voice cracked. "My own daughter, a white wolf. Can you possibly understand the danger this will put her in? You both are nothing more than children. Children playing at being an alpha. Do not overstep your authority here, Garrett." Cade's voice was cold, colder than I had ever heard it before. It sent a trickle of fear down my spine, and I found myself worried for Garrett. I could feel Cade's anger like it was my own, and tasted that metallic tinge on my tongue. "While you may be her father, we are her mates. You are in our pack, and you will treat us with respect. Children or not, we can demolish your pack. All of us understand the danger she is in, Garrett. She is your daughter. Show some compassion. We can't just lock her away and hope the world forgets." I recognized the voice of Alec and Cade's father. "Now that the world knows, word will spread. All we can do is work together to keep her safe. Do you think you could put aside your differences and do that for Claire? I will never agree with the position your children hold in my daughter's life, but, yes. For Claire, I will." Garrett paused for a moment, then replied. He sounded resigned, but also worried. Garrett was not the father figure I had pictured for myself, but I was beginning to understand him better. Feeling his emotions, it gave me more insight than I had ever had before. Where I once resented him, hated him, even, I now understood. Garrett cared in his own way. Yes, it might be superficial and based on my position in his pack, but he cared nonetheless. He was worried, terrified even that this would be used against me. While fear, worry, and anxiety rolled through him in waves, I could feel his pride. He was proud a white wolf had come from him, that one lived within his family. "You do not seem surprised about this revelation, Julian," Alec pointed out. Alec's words had me focusing on Julian. As his emotions washed over me, my entire body stiffened and my eyes snapped open. A wave of shock rolled through me, strong enough to force my hand. Light flooded my vision and I cringed against the pain behind my eyes. I was laying on a couch, the smooth fabric felt like silk against my skin. I glanced down at my body and flushed red. Someone had put clothes on me. Alec or Cade, I had hoped. Standing a few feet away were Garrett, Julian, Alec, Cade, and their parents. My mouth moved on its own, and though my words were raspy, I was understood perfectly. "It's because he already knows. Don't you, Uncle?" I spoke. All eyes snapped over to me, and I let Julian's guilt wash over me in waves. He had known and said nothing. From the looks of surprise, he had even kept the truth from his own brother. The pieces clicked together easily, and I now understood how Julian had known. I had only ever shifted one other time, back when I had run. If I hadn't been able to sense emotions, I would have felt enraged. Julian had betrayed his family, had tried to have his own niece captured. As it stood, I felt absolutely no malice or ill intentions from Julian, only intense guilt. Alec and Cade surged forward, slamming Julian into the wall with enough force to shatter the pictures that hung. Cade's voice was low, contorted in what was now a guttural snarl. "Give me one reason I shouldn't kill you." I pulled myself from the couch and stood on wobbly legs. I still felt weak, but managed to hobble over to where Alec and Cade stood. I placed a hand on each shoulder and fought against the rage that nearly consumed me. "Don't kill him." I shook my head. "Let him go, Please. Let him go. Cade growled, turning his head to meet my eyes. Some of his rage faded, but the brunt of it remained. We can put the pieces together ourselves too. You shifted once before this, the time when you were nearly captured. Seems Julian's been busy trying to FK over his family. He did try to capture me, but not for the reasons you think. I pleaded, guys, you know I can feel what he feels. I don't know why he did it, but he didn't do it to hurt me. That much I can tell. You can feel emotions. Garrett scoffed, running a hand down his face. Well, that explains what you did on the battlefield. Please, let him go. I repeated, ignoring Garrett for the time being. I'd like to hear an explanation. Alec and Cade reluctantly released Garrett, but remained close at my side. They stood on either side of me, my towering and slightly overprotective bodyguards. I didn't mind their protective side. If anything, it was the only thing that made me feel truly safe. Thanks for that, kid. Julian grunted, smoothing out his shirt. Explain. Alec barked, you'll find we're not nearly as kind or patient as Claire is. You have 10 seconds before we make Claire the official leader of your pack. When I was your age, I didn't know what I was either. Garrett and I are half-brothers. Our father was a prick of a man. Didn't want a half-breed bastard son sullying the name of his family, so he tossed me aside as a child. Unlike you, I was not my father's firstborn. Half-breeds have a 30% chance at being able to shift. As the son of an alpha, the odds were a little higher. Once I turned 18 and finally shifted, he deemed me useful. Julian sneered, clearly harboring no kind feelings for his father. Like you, I ran. The difference between us is that no one came looking for me. I shifted alone, and remained alone. It was by pure luck that I became the alpha of a band of rogues. I nearly died at least a dozen times. I wanted to spare you from that. You did not know me, so you would not listen. While my methods were a bit unsavory, I couldn't allow you to make the mistake I made. Alec and Cade looked to me and I nodded, he's telling the truth. I wanted to remain angry at Julian, but it's harder than you think when you can feel the emotions of others. I felt nothing but concern and sincerity from Julian. While I'd never consider the man my family, he did what he thought best at the time. Now that I had Alec and Cade by my side, no one would attempt such a thing ever again. You know that what you did was wrong, don't you? I moved an eyebrow at Julian, who shifted under my gaze. No need to scold me like a child, kid. He grunted, brushing back the long strands of his hair. I get it. Didn't count on you having 2 alphas for mates. That would have been nice to know, Garrett. It didn't concern you at the time. Garrett glared at his half-brother before turning his attention to me. Well, now that Julian's life isn't dangling by a thread, we need to discuss the repercussions of your actions, Claire. Don't even try to pull that shit, Garrett. I snapped, narrowing my eyes at him. While I could feel the emotions of others, I wasn't going to suddenly become a pushover. Garrett had no right to blame me for what happened. Alec and Cade were in trouble, and I knew without a doubt that he would have done the same for his mate. I could feel Alec's pain. I didn't know what happened to them, and given the choice, I'd do it all again. You're not just some regular white wolf, Claire. Garrett snapped, you're a white wolf who is heir to not 1, but 2 packs. Not only that, you are the mate of 2 alphas. You might not understand your place within our world, but let me enlighten you. Once you inherit all 3 packs, you will become the most powerful werewolf in thousands of years. I get it, I'll be the Luna of the largest pack in the country. I replied, letting out a long sigh. Alec and Kate already told me this, Garrett. Really? Did they tell you about the high table? Garrett scoffed, his eyes darting over to Alec and Kate. The high table? I asked, frowning at the three of them. What does the high table have to do with anything? Alec frowned, looking towards his dad. I hoped that they might overlook Claire, but now that she's a white wolf I'm afraid there's no avoiding it, is there? Alec and Kate's dad sighed. No, there will be no avoiding it. Garrett snapped, they'll want to meet her. They'll want to analyze her and see what she can do. Then when the time comes, there will be a seat open at the table. Chapter 70. Can someone explain what the high table is? I demanded. The high table is composed of the most powerful alphas of our time. The alphas of the 5 largest packs. They are our government. They hold sway over every alpha in this country. Garrett replied. I placed the pieces together and frowned. When I become Luna of all 3 packs, I'll officially have the largest pack in the country. They'll want me to take a seat at the high table. You? Never. Julian scoffed, his expression souring. Doesn't matter if you could kill them all, they'd never let a woman sit at the high table. They'll insist on your mates taking that honor. That seat belongs to Claire. Alex spoke first, looking to Kate who nodded in approval. They both met my eyes, and the emotion radiating from them had my heart clenching. She could help protect all future white wolves. She could change things. That she could. Which makes her all the more dangerous. Garrett spoke darkly, turning his eyes on me. Whichever alpha you boot from the high table will be furious, and they'll set their eyes directly on you. They can try, but we'll keep her safe. Kate snapped, the members of our pack will protect her with their lives. Good. It seems we agree on something, for once. Garrett retorted, you have my pack's full support but I will not fall under your rule, boy. If we do this, we do it as equals. Agreed. Alec nodded, and Kate followed suit. You have the support of my pack as well. Julian nodded. They won't come for her. They'll expect her to come to them. I'd say you have a week, maybe 2 before they call a meeting. Garrett grimaced, running his hand through his hair. You'll have no choice but to attend. To decline is to declare war. Then we wait. Alec replied, his eyes softening when they met my own. We'll be ready when they call on us. I want to train. I blurted the words through my own fear-soaked gaze. This was becoming so much more than I had intended. I had accepted Alec and Kate. I had accepted what I was and what I could do, but this was a lot. First, I had to deal with the fact that I wasn't human. Then, I had to accept that I was a coveted white wolf, and now I had 5 of the most powerful alphas gunning for me. What frightened me the most was that I wasn't sure if they wanted me dead or captured. Claire, there's no need, Alec began, but surprisingly Garrett cut him off. Actually, that's not a bad idea. Garrett replied, giving Alec a hard look. White wolf or no, I will not have my daughter defenseless. Kate and I won't be able to train her. Alec frowned, and I flinched against the pain that encompassed him. Both Alec and Kate looked at me. We wouldn't be able to hurt you, doll. Someone else will have to train you. I have just the person in mind. Garrett nodded to himself. I took the moment of silence to speak. I think while we're waiting, we should figure out what it is I can do. The better we understand my abilities, the better I can use them. If I know how to control what I do, there isn't a werewolf alive immune to my abilities. There aren't many records on white wolves, sweetheart. Cade murmured. When Alec and I searched, we found next to nothing. Perhaps, you weren't searching in the right places. Julian mused, his eyes lighting up. I think I might be able to help with that. All right, then it's settled. Alec, Garrett, and I will gather all three of our packs. We'll go over protection detail to make sure an attack like this doesn't happen again. Julian, dig up as much information as possible on what Claire can do. Garrett, have your trainer meet us at the gym in town. Cade grunted, his dark eyes simmering with suppressed rage. We will not have Claire training alone, no matter how much you trust your trainer. Tori will attend training with her from here on out. What about the attack? Who's going to find out why it happened? I asked. It was a rogue attack, doll. They happen, unfortunately. Alec frowned. Are you sure? That was awfully big for just a rogue attack. I questioned. I'm not trying to make something out of nothing, but when you told me about rogue attacks before, they always seemed so much smaller. Claire might have a point. Alec and Cade's dad chimed in. I'll look into the rogue attack, see if I can make anything of it. I've lived through too many attacks to miss something like this. If there's anything more to it, I'll find out. All right, then we're settled. Alec nodded. We'll begin everything tomorrow. As of right now, my brother and I need some time with our mate. The house cleared out pretty quickly after that, but the thick tension in the air had yet to diminish. I wasn't sure it ever would. Not only was my secret out, but the deadliest men in the country had their eyes turned on me. As soon as we were alone, I was pulled into the strong arms of Alec and Cade. Both had me squished between them, but I couldn't bring myself to mind. I let their sense envelop me, and cherished the brief reprieve from today's events. Unfortunately, the second they pulled away, reality came crashing down. How bad was it? I asked, my voice small. How many died? Don't, not right now, doll. Alec murmured, planting a long KSS on my forehead. We don't want to talk of death right now. Let us appreciate you. Cade spoke next, his rough voice unusually soft. When I saw you out there, I couldn't get to you. We didn't know what would happen. Their L.P.S. replaced the words they spoke, and I basked in every lingering touch and K.S.S. I let their L.P.S. and fingers chase away the death that hung over our heads. I wasn't sure how long we spent in each other's arms, still covered in the filth and grime of the fight. None of that mattered. They were safe and alive. Alec wasn't even wounded anymore. All that remained of his wound was a jagged, pink scar on his leg. After spending the better half of an hour in each other's arms, the twins joined me for a much-needed shower. I didn't have the energy to argue as they washed every inch of my skin, showering me in their soft yet heated touches. Each each lingering touch replenished the strength I hadn't realized I'd exerted. We showered until the steaming water ran cold, and until the sensitive spot between my legs grew sore from touch. Wiped clean from the blood and grime that once stained my body, I felt much better. I was far from being at full strength, but with Alec and Cade at my side, it wouldn't take long. While Alec held me close, whispering sweet words in my ear, Cade brought me something to eat. With my stomach full and my heart light, I curled into the arms of my two incredible mates. I snuggled under the thick comforter, embracing the twins' thick body heat and claiming it as my own. My eyelids grew heavy, and I fought to keep them open. I wanted to prolong this moment, to draw it out as long as possible. We nearly lost our minds, Claire. Alec whispered, you can't ever do something like that again. You can't ask that of me, you can't. I shook my head, cutting the two of them off with a hard look. Tell me you wouldn't do the same for me. Tell me you wouldn't drop everything and come running if you thought I was in danger. When both of the twins remained silent, I nodded in confirmation. I know, I know. I mumbled against Kate's chest. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded different. Gone was the frightened, shell-shocked girl. I had only ever met two Lunas, Garrett's wife and the twins' mom. If I had to guess, this voice was that of a Luna. Strong, proud, and devastatingly protective of her mates. After this, I'll be prepared. I'll train hard, and if something like this ever happens again, not a single werewolf will stop me from being at your side. I'll kill them all, every last one. Chapter 71. After a long but much-needed night with the twins, I woke to an empty bed. Well, it wasn't completely empty. A head of flaming hair was the first thing I saw as I opened my eyes, followed by Tori's smirking face. She was perched on the edge of the bed, her chin resting on her hands. How long have you been here? I grunted, my voice thick with sleep. As I rubbed the cobwebs from her eyes, she straightened and flashed me a cheeky smile. Oh, a half an hour or so. She shrugged, brushing some strands of hair from her forehead. As my senses sharpened and the thick haze of post-sleep faded, I noticed she was wearing black leggings. Her thick curls were pulled back from her face, and her round eyes held a flicker of impatient excitement. Do you always watch your friends sleep? I snickered, sitting up against the wooden headboard. I most certainly do not, that is an honor bestowed only to my Luna. She smirked, which quickly turned into a humorous grin. I must say, Luna Claire, you have horrible bedhead in the morning. Oh, shut up. I hissed, tossing one of the plush pillows at her face. Oh, testy. She tsked, jumping from the bed before the pillow managed to hit her square in the face. Alec and Cade must love morning Claire. So feisty, so fierce. Keep that mindset for training today, you're going to be one grumpy Luna once we're finished. I grumbled incoherently as I stood from the bed and meandered over to the walk-in closet across the room. I had learned pretty quickly that Tori was one of those infuriating people who could wake up at 5 in the morning, chipper as can be. It took me a little longer to wake up, and even longer to shake the initial grumpiness that followed. Caffeine helped, but I had always hated waking before the sun crested in the sky. Chipper as always, I see. I snorted, rummaging through the clothes hanging in the closet. Alec and Cade's mom had taken it upon herself to purchase me an entirely new wardrobe. Her style was very different from my own, but I was beginning to like the clothes she had chosen for me. What made me most uncomfortable were the frilly sets of bras and underwear, that I would probably never get used to. While I was used to the thought of Alec and Cade as my mates, the accepting nature of their family was taking a bit longer to get used to. They opened up their home to me without issue, and even let the three of us share a bedroom. Alec and Cade had briefly told me that werewolves weren't worried about mates being intimate with one another. It was a natural occurrence, they said. Oh, you're not going to want to wear that. Tori shook her head, leaning against the door frame. Why not? I asked, raising my eyebrow at her. I stuffed the black t-shirt I had clutched in my hands back into the drawer it had come from. The shirt belonged to Alec, just as the sweatpants I had picked out belonged to Cade. Their clothes were more comfortable to roam the house in, and had the added bonus of smelling like my mates. They never minded when a few articles of their clothing went missing, only to reappear days later on my body. If anything, they had the pleasure of removing said clothes at the end of the day. You're going to be miserable wearing that. She shrugged, and chuckled boisterously. All sweaty and whatnot. Opt for leggings. You'll show a bit of skin, but think of how much Alec and Cade will enjoy that later on. Fine. I scoffed, rummaging through the drawers of the dresser that sat in the walk-in closet. Only because you put it that way. Tell me, what's it like having two mates? She giggled, ending her words with a devious smile. At this point, I'll take one. A horrid blush stained my face, and I could practically hear her thoughts about what everyone knew went down between the three of us. The day after first sleeping with Alec and Cade, I had noticed a change in my own scent. I seemed to carry a piece of Alec and Cade wherever I went, and couldn't ignore the knowing looks I received from quite a few people. They had sheepishly told me that when first mating, our scents would merge. Not only did I carry a piece of them with me, but they carried some of my scent as well. As much as I wanted to be angry with them, I couldn't not when I could feel their emotions and see the happiness on their faces. It's fun, more fun than I initially thought, I smirked, offering up no further details. I'm sure you'll find your mate eventually. Oh, come on. Tori groaned, a hand against her heart. Give me some juicy details. Judging from the blush on your face, I'm sure there's plenty of nice tidbits you can tell me. I should probably get dressed now, before we're late for training, I smirked, stepping into the bathroom with my clothes clutched in hand. I could hear Tori's groan from inside the bathroom and chuckled at her expense. I tugged down the thick hem of the sports bra I wore, scowling at how my entire midsection was exposed. It's not that I typically dressed modestly, but I had never worn something quite as revealing as this. If what Tori had said was true, I'd take an exposed stomach over being hot and miserable any day. Alec and Cade's mom had set out an entire breakfast for us, one I was dying to dig into. It was my turn to groan when Tori handed me a foul-looking smoothie and a couple protein bars before dragging me out of the house. It smells like feet, I commented, wincing as I took a large gulp of the fruity concoction. Plug your nose. She teased, it's a protein shake, Claire. They're not meant to taste fabulous. Are there vegetables in this? I grimaced, glancing down at the dark green shade of the shake. Among other things. That was all she said, snorting at the look of horror on my face. When we pulled into the parking lot of the local gym, a look of confusion had formed on my face. The gym in our pack was nice, much nicer than the one that sat by the high school I went to. What confused me was why we were here to begin with. Here, you're going to need this. Layer up, Luna. Tori chuckled, tossing a small stick of deodorant at me. I did as she said and layered the deodorant on my underarms, shrugging as a strong floral scent wafted into my nose. Better than stinking like sweat, I murmured appreciatively. You gotta train in your human form first, Tori commented, rummaging through the trunk of her car for a large, pink duffel bag. The stronger you are in your human form, the stronger your wolf is. Does that mean I'll be lifting weights? I grunted, a slight sour tone to my voice. It was no secret that I had the coordination of a toddler, but I had yet to see what finally shifting had done for me. Back when I absolutely failed at sports, I had thought I was merely human. My senses were sharper now, my eyesight crisp in a way it hadn't been before. Above all, I desperately hoped I could be useful to this pack besides my strange white wolf abilities. I wanted Alec and Cade to know that I could take care of myself instead of relying on a power I had no idea how to control. We'll both be lifting weights. Tori quipped with a cheeky grin, don't worry, we'll firm up that perky behind in no time. It's not my behind I'm worried about. I huffed, following her to the front door of the building. And my behind is already perky. The gym in town was a large modern building with a parking lot that could easily accommodate everyone in town. A large window gave me a clear view inside the gym, where I could see a multitude of men and women wandering from machine to machine. We stepped inside and was greeted by the scent of disinfectant and something similar to leather. Upon entering, I found myself surprised. Whenever I thought of a gym, I had a pretty clear image in my head. A bunch of muscular, sweat-stained men grunting as they flexed and lifted weights in front of a mirror. It was just another thing I had been wrong about. Sure, there were plenty of muscular men in this gym, but there were also just as many women. The scent of sweat was so diminished, it was easily ignorable. If anything, the most noticeable scent was that of cleaner and deodorant. The bottom half of the gym was huge. Apart from a long desk that sat a few feet from the entrance, the rest of the room was filled with machines of all types. Half of the wall was lined with floor-to-ceiling mirrors, and there was a plethora of those water bottle refill stations everywhere. The woman at the front desk was casually dressed and was merrily chatting with some of the current gym-goers. Her golden hair was pulled up in a high pony, and she wore similar athletic clothes to what Tori and I wore. When she caught my eye, her spine seemed to straighten a bit, and just a tad of that easy-go humor left her eyes. "Luna Claire, it's an honor to have you here." She grinned, coming around the counter to approach us. She gripped my hand firmly and gave it a shake before flashing Tori an equally polite smile. "Everything here is at your disposal. Your trainer is upstairs in one of our private rooms. Feel free to use any of our faculties. On the second floor you'll also find a smoothie bar, and on the third floor are the locker rooms. We have showers, and even a sauna, if you're into that sort of thing." I managed to stammer a suitable thank you and followed Tori through the maze of weight machines. The quiet sound of weights clicking could be heard, along with the ever-so-silent murmur that came from many of the people working out. While many eyes darted over to meet my own, none strayed any lower than my face. Men and women of all ages greeted me with a slight nod before turning back to their workouts. Alec and Kate had explained the pack dynamics to me a few days ago. They hadn't planned on introducing me so soon, but my appearance during the rogue battle spurred attention. Men and women of all ages would show me nothing but respect, as my word was also law. While I love and respect you, my benevolent Luna, I will never hesitate to call you out on your shit. Tori grinned, wrapping an arm around my shoulders as she steered me towards the stairs. "Honestly, I appreciate that." I chuckled along with her. "I've been treated like vermin my entire life, and now I'm suddenly royalty. It's really strange, and kind of unnerving. You've been surrounded by your entire life, what did you expect?" She grunted, but quickly wiped away the grimace that formed on her face. "Think of it this way, now you're surrounded by people who know how awesome you are. Let's hope it doesn't all go to my head." I laughed. "That's also in my job description." She winked, "As the Luna's best friend, it is my job to make sure you don't become all snooty and full of yourself. I hope you know I'm not paying you for this." I scoffed. "To be in your glorious presence is payment enough, Luna Claire." She cooed, poking her tongue out at me. "If you keep talking to me like that, I'm definitely going to get a big head," I replied, giving her a genuine smile. Chapter 72. The stairs wrapped around a couple times before ending at the second floor. There was a wide, brightly lit hallway that led to a multitude of rooms. Through the large windows on either side of the wall, I could see multiple fitness rooms with foam flooring. We made our way to the only unoccupied room. Well, it was mostly unoccupied. Standing in the large room was a man I had never seen before. He was up there in age, around 60 or so, but he was in impeccable shape. The t-shirt he wore couldn't hide the muscles beneath, or the bulkiness of his form. His short cropped hair was grey, with just a small spattering of white. "Welcome, girls." His raspy voice boomed throughout the empty room, nearly making me jump. He turned to greet the two of us, and my breath halted in my throat. His face was angular in a way that looked familiar, and while both of his eyes were the same color I had seen that color before. They were so blue that they almost looked white, just like one of mine and Garrett's eyes. Are we related?" I frowned, looking at a somewhat altered copy of Garrett's face. "Well, you're quick on the draw." He laughed, a booming sound that was nothing like the Garrett I had come to know. "Sure are. I'm your grandfather's brother." "My grandfather?" I nodded, temporarily at a loss for words. It seemed surprise took away my filter, and I found myself speaking without thinking. "Julian says he was crazy." He paused for a moment, looking me in the eyes before answering. Yeah, he was crazy." He nodded, cracking a wide smile. "The humor in our family seems to skip a generation or two." "It skipped Garrett, didn't it?" I asked dryly, unable to keep a straight face when the man erupted in laughter. "Oh, I wish I would have met you sooner. The name's Rick." He smiled, his laughter dying down. "So, I hear you need some training. Thought you white wolves were supposed to be all-powerful." "I wouldn't say all-powerful." I shrugged, besides, learning to fight never hurt anyone. "Right you are." He nodded, walking over to the front of the room. "All right, get to stretching and we'll start in 10. I take it back. Learning to fight has hurt people, mostly me." I groaned, lying flat on the foam floor. The leggings I wore were damp with sweat, and I swore there was a puddle around my shaking body. Tori laid beside me, her head propped up on her hand. "I didn't take you for a quitter, Luna," she cooed, flashing me a grin. "Oh, I'm not quitting." I shook my head. "Complain?" "Very much so. I admit, you've got it bad." She nodded. "Werewolves start training at a super young age. Your human life has made you totally out of shape." "Don't remind me." I groaned, refusing to move from my comfortable spot on the mat. The muscles in my legs throbbed and ached, as did the rest of my body. We had trained for nearly 3 hours, then Rick sent us downstairs to lift some weights. We met back up on the second floor to talk over the plan for tomorrow. The only consolation of today's training was that my lack of coordination seemed to be completely remedied. I no longer stumbled over my own feet, and could block a punch fairly well after a few failed attempts. I had to give it to Tori, she had a mean punch. "Oh, hello Alpha." Tori's voice was full of suppressed laughter. "I see training went well." Alex's laugh had me jumping to my feet, and smoothing down my messy hair. Alec wore a plain black t-shirt that clung to every delicious dip and groove that graced his body. The sight made my mouth water, and for that brief moment I had all sorts of unsavory thoughts. My tongue ran across my lower lip as I wondered if he might let me trace the muscles on his body with something other than my fingers. Judging from the sparkle in his eye, he'd be more than happy to let me do as I pleased. "Well, I'll see you two ladies tomorrow. Bright and early." Rick chuckled, giving me a pat on the back. "It was nice finally meeting you, Claire." "It was nice meeting you too, Rick." I smiled back at him, feeling that familiar clench in my heart as his emotions registered within me. Rick was genuinely happy to meet me, and I could already feel the F***ness he held for me. I continued to find it incredible that the moment I left my human life behind, I had finally found my family. Alec, Cade, Tori, even the twins' parents, they were my family. Rick left with a final wave, and I looked towards my mate's dazzling smile. I've got to say, I like this look. Alec purred, pulling me into his arms. He buried his face in the crook of my sweaty neck and inhaled. You smell good. I smell like sweat. I snorted, looking up at him with an eyebrow raised. I think you smell delicious. He smirked, rolling his plush lower lip in between his teeth. He inched in even closer and my heart sped up in response. I wonder if you taste as good as you smell. A heavy shudder rolled through me as Alec's T0NGUE darted out and flicked against my earlobe. The moment his T0NGUE came in contact with my skin, his emotions burst forth, broken free from the dam that had held them at bay. Well, I think that's my cue to leave. Tori cleared her throat. Somehow, she managed to keep a straight face, but she couldn't hide the devious glint in her eyes. Just as she opened the door to leave, she called out behind her. Oh, just in case you were wondering, that door over there leads to a very large and spacious lounge. See you tomorrow, Claire. She's not one for subtlety, is she? Alec snorted, but the dark and heavy emotions that radiated from him had not ceased in the slightest. I found myself losing the motivation to fight them. The soreness in my limbs was all but forgotten as I stood wrapped in Alec's arms. Maybe we should go back to the house, I suggested breathlessly, swallowing thickly when Alex twitched into a smirk. I thought you were sore, doll. I looked up at Alec through hooded eyes, keeping my voice low and alluring. I can handle whatever you throw at me, Alec. Alec's intense desire mixed with my own until I couldn't separate our emotions. All I knew was that I wanted him, every glorious inch of him, until not only were our emotions merged, but we were as well. By the time I'm done with you, I'll have to carry you from the building, doll. He chuckled low in my ear, his fingers dancing along my exposed stomach. I've got to say, this outfit makes me think all sorts of things. Does it? I gasped as his fingers grazed against my groin, adding the slightest amount of pressure. The house. I don't have the patience to wait that long, I'd end up taking you in the car. I say we check out that lounge. He growled deeply, the lounge. I squeaked, my eyes wide with surprise. We were going to do it here? In this gym full of people? Would they be able to hear what was going on, or worse, smell it? You worry too much, doll. He chuckled against my neck. Cade and I are their alpha. Even if they did know what was going on, none would dare stop us. Won't they hear it? I swallowed, unable to mention the other option. There was no way I wanted to think about a gym full of people scenting my AR*Uzel, no matter what they called Alec and Cade. Depends, how loud do you plan to be? Alec smirked, his eyes flickering dangerously. Tori had been right, there was a door in the training room that led to a lounge. It was a decent-sized room with a couple of couches and a small kitchen. There were a couple tall coolers that held an abundance of drinks, smoothies, and protein shakes. Alec kicked the door shut behind him and flicked the lock on the door. I love you, doll. I love you so much. I just experienced was incredible, I had experienced nothing yet. Hearing those words come from Alec's mouth, knowing he had been the one to say them first, it confirmed everything for me. I could feel it now, that emotion I had no name for, the emotion I had never once experienced for myself. It was love. Love was warm. It was warmth and comfort wrapped into one, coupled with protectiveness and rolled in absolute awe. Love was an emotion that had no beginning or ending, no limits to how much a person could feel. It was an endless chasm that brought nothing but peace and happiness to those lucky enough to fall into it. Now that I had finally felt that emotion for myself, I couldn't comprehend how I had gone so long without its warm embrace. I had been denying myself, unable to admit how I truly felt about Alec and Cade, but that was long over. I love you too, Alec. More than anything in this world. Chapter 73. I can do that myself. I told Alec, sitting up from the pale couch in the gym's lounge. After some much-needed time together, I was a little more than ready to head home and take a long shower. Not only had the sweat begun to dry to my skin, but I now had a comfortable soreness between my legs. Alec had scrounged up a washcloth and was currently running it under the cold water of the sink. Every so often his eyes would dart over to where I laid, completely undressed and surprisingly unabashed on the couch. "You sure about that, doll?" He flashed me a grin that made my insides melt. It was hard not to smile when the twins looked at me this way. I would have once called myself clinically insane for claiming to love a man I had only known for a month or so. While in this case I had two men, things were different with them. I felt like I knew them in a way I didn't with others, that there was no other alternative for me to love them as deeply as they loved me. Over time, love changes and grows, but I knew ours wouldn't ever lessen. "I'm pretty sure I can handle a washcloth." I smirked. My smirk quickly turned to a pout when Alec batted my hands away, and began dabbing at his release, which just so happened to be sitting on my stomach. Neither one of us had been prepared, but I suppose it was better than the alternative. While I wasn't completely opposed to the thought of having children with Alec and Cade, I knew I wasn't going to rush into anything. While the washcloth was made of a horribly scratchy material, each brush of his hand was incredibly gentle. They were both so rough, so dominate, but this was different. Each time I had slept with them, they always insisted on taking care of me afterwards. The few times I had thought about being intimate with a guy, this wasn't something I thought would happen afterwards. "Really? I'm fairly sure you almost passed out at some point back there." Alec's chuckle was a deep rumble that I could feel in the pit of my stomach. His amused and humorous smile told me he was only halfway joking. "Oh, I did not." I scoffed, unable to keep a grin from forming on my own face. I smacked his hands away and watched as he walked over to the sink. Alec grabbed a second washcloth and ran it under the cold water before settling back onto the couch. His calloused hands were incredibly gentle as he ran his fingers up the smooth skin of my thigh. "If we were home, I'd use something much softer." He frowned, using the softer side of the washcloth to clean the inside of my thighs. "Honestly, you're perfect." I chuckled a bit breathlessly, feeling the effects of his touch far too strongly. I was sure my body would never stop reacting to their touches, and I looked forward to every heated and gentle moment between us. "You and Cade both are." A quick flash of disbelief rolled through him. It was nearly too fast for me to detect, but I could taste a slight bitter edge to the emotion. "Don't tell Cade that." He chuckled, giving no sign that he had even felt that quick flash of emotion. "I like to think his ego is a bit bigger than mine. I think the two of you are evenly matched." I teased, noticing that the humor didn't reach Alec's eyes. My lips twitched into a frown as I met his eyes, feeling that same bitter emotion roll through me. "What's wrong, Alec? Don't try to fool me, you know I can feel your emotions. No point in hiding it, is there?" He flashed me a devastatingly soft smile, one that filled me with both warmth and icy cold. He picked my sports bra off the floor and untangled the stretchy fabric. I let him take his time gathering his thoughts, and smiled as he helped me into it. Next came my underwear and leggings, both of which smelled as though they needed a good wash. I couldn't believe how much I had truly sweat today, more than I ever had in my life, I was sure. Only when the two of us were fully dressed, did I plop down on Alex's lap. This was different than earlier. There was nothing behind my actions, and my only goal was to wipe those negative emotions from him before they could linger and fester. I was happy, happier than I had ever been in my life, and I needed to know what was troubling him so much. I settled onto his lap, and sighed as his muscular arms wound around my body. I grazed my nose over the rough stubble on his chin before giving him a light kiss. I had never felt comfort and safety like this, nor had I ever been held by anybody, but I couldn't understand how I had gone so long without it. Our surroundings melted away until I no longer cared nor remembered that we were in a small lounge at the local gym. The where never mattered, only who. It's no secret Kate and I slept around. Alex sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Kate was worse than I was, but I'm beginning to think I wasn't any better. While we never physically hurt them, but we never treated them as anything more than a temporary fix. Most didn't care and would take whatever they could, but some genuinely wanted something more. Neither one of us cared. Before you came along, well, we didn't exactly want a mate at all. I think the thought of being tied down scared Cade more than it did me, but what we did was wrong. Who you were back then, it's not how I see you now. I frowned, letting my fingers roam over the coarse planes of his face. I probably sound like a horrible person for saying this, but everyone makes mistakes. No one is purely good or bad, we're all a mix of both. His skin was velvety smooth, only to turn rough as I met the dark stubble along his cheek and jaw. I could feel him relax under my roaming fingers, and the razor-sharp edge of his emotions began to dull. It was nice to know I had the same effect on them as they had on me. A single touch could evoke a whirlpool of emotions within me, all different depending on the intention. You're the least horrible person I've ever met, doll. He laughed lightly, placing his lips against my forehead. Believe me, Kate and I have met a lot of awful people, but never anyone like you. You're so much more than what we deserve. All we can do is try to be worthy of you. Think of it this way, you're both my mates for a reason. I smiled up at him, my heart heavy and full all at once. My smile morphed into something playful. Maybe some of my infinite goodness will rub off on you. Infinite goodness, hey. His stoic facade cracked, giving way to a playful smile of his own. His face moved in closer to my own, and his lips hovered just a few inches away. When he spoke, his voice was deliciously low and raspy. Or, maybe some will just end up corrupting you. That doesn't sound so bad. I replied, just a tad bit breathless as I lost myself within the dark pools of his burning eyes. As much as I'd love to stay here, alone with you, I'm afraid Kate is going to be wondering where we are. He smirked, his lips finally lowering to meet my own. As his teeth grazed my lower lip, bringing on the tiniest amount of pain, a moan left my lips from the pure taste of him. If you keep making those sounds, I'm afraid we'll have to stay for even longer. You're the one who had to kiss me like that. I exhaled, my words ending on a little laugh. So sensitive. He chuckled, standing from the couch with me in his arms. His deep eyes glittered mischievously as he looked down on me. Do you think you're able to walk, or should I carry you out of the gym? There is no way you're carrying me out of here, no matter how sore I am. I snorted, pushing gently against his chest until I was back on my feet. It's bad enough half the people in this gym probably heard what we were doing, I don't need to give them any further proof. I walked out of the gym with my head held high. I wasn't receiving any more stares than usual, so I assumed none had any clue what happened mere minutes earlier. Alec took me back to the house, but had to leave shortly after. Cade had accompanied Garrett to his pack, following a lead they had on white wolves. The last Alec had spoken to Cade, they had found some sort of information. After what I had done during the rogue battle, I wasn't sure if I felt relieved or frightened. I had turned every foul emotion back on the rogues, and it frightened me at how good it truly felt. I had cleansed myself of every disgusting thing I ever felt, every ounce of contempt, anger, or loathing I had ever felt left me in that moment. It was then that I realized how much those emotions drag you down. They poison every good thought, every positive experience and taint them. The only way to truly keep them from harming you, was to let them go. Since coming back home with Alec and Cade, I hadn't spared Melissa a single thought. If anything, I had purposefully erased her from my mind. Sitting in the kitchen of Alec and Cade's house, I began to think of her. I had never been the type of person to hate someone, but there had been a few times in my life where I truly hated Melissa and Frank. Hate was the most poisonous emotion of all, and I never once thought about how it might have affected me. Since letting go of all those ugly emotions, I had realized something. I no longer hated her, I felt sorry for her. Her and Frank could no longer hurt me, and they never would again. It was them who were stuck in the same vicious cycle, building a wall around them with those corruptive emotions. Letting them go, I had never felt freer. As soon as Alec dropped me off, I sped upstairs to shower and change. My stomach rumbled so hard I jumped, and opted out of the shower for now. Instead, I changed into a comfortable t-shirt and jeans, wandering down to the kitchen in search of anything to eat. "You look like you're deep in thought." The twins' mom chuckled as she swept into the kitchen. Her blonde hair was pulled up in a messy ponytail, a shade that was somewhat similar to Melissa's. Where Melissa was vindictive, manipulative, and emotionally abusive, Alec and Cade's mom was the complete opposite. She was everything a mother should be and more. She had raised two incredible sons who not only accepted their mistakes, but strived to be better. She was supportive when she needed, and stern when it was called for. Even as adults, Alec and Cade would never go against their mom. In the short time I lived here, she had become a friend to me. She was just one of those people where caring and nurturing seemed to be second nature. "You hungry?" she asked, rummaging through the fridge. The sides of her eyes crinkled when my stomach rumbled on cue, and she let out a light, musical laugh. "I'll take that as a yes." She chuckled, placing a few random ingredients onto the counters. "Tori had me drink this foul protein shake before training this morning." I scrunched my nose, remembering the bitter taste of kale. At this point, "I'll take a handful of nuts." "Well, I think I can whip up something better than a handful of nuts," she replied, a kind smile on her face. "How's pizza and some chocolate chip cookies sound? Doesn't that defeat the point of working out?" I asked, though I couldn't deny my mouth watered at the mere words. Best thing about being a werewolf, we were born to be strong and athletic. She chuckled, "You've got to eat more, especially now that you're training." "Cookies and pizza, it is." I grinned, rubbing my hands together in anticipation. "Grab an apron." With as much as Cade and Alec eat, I need all the help I can get. She snorted, "Don't even get me started on their father." Living with Melissa and Frank, I had never actually learned to cook. My diet consisted of gas station food, packets of instant noodles, and those salty burritos you pop in the microwave. Alec and Cade's mom was one of those women who just seemed to be good at everything. Not only was she fierce and protective, but she made nearly everything from scratch. I helped her make the dough for the pizza as best I could, and poked at it while she pushed it aside to rise. I had a thick coating of flour in my hair, and was thankful I hadn't yet gotten a shower. Once the dough had grown nearly triple in size, the twins' mom divided it between the two of us. "Make sure you get it even, like this," she murmured, and I watched as she skillfully cut and rolled the dough into a perfect circular shape. "As long as the dough is even, it doesn't matter what shape it is." "So, I can make any shape?" I asked, a somewhat cheesy idea forming in my mind. I silently laughed at the horrible pun I had made and got to work shaping and flattening the dough. I had intended for the pizza to be shaped like a heart, but it was a lot harder than it looked. Instead of an attractive-looking heart, I had one that was not only lumpy, but lopsided. "Claire, what is that?" Alec and Cade's mom frowned, fighting hard to keep the laughter from her voice. The innocent look on her face couldn't fool me, I could feel her emotions. I felt that familiar sweetness of motherly affection along with a bright trickle of amusement and humor. "It's a heart." I paused, biting my lip as I stared down at my work. Oh, I see it." She smiled encouragingly. "It looks great, dear. You know I can feel your emotions, right?" I frowned, but the expression quickly gave way to hearty laughter. The sharp pain that once pierced my heart at the thought of not having a mom vanished. I wasn't sure how long it had been gone, but I couldn't remember the last time I had felt it. Perhaps finding my own family had erased the pain, or maybe I did that myself. Either way, as our laughter rang loudly throughout the house, I couldn't think of anywhere I'd rather be. 2 hours later, Cade walked into the kitchen. "Cade." I grinned, the scalding pizza tray I had in my oven-mitted hands clattered onto the counter. I bounced over to him and leapt into his arms, letting myself become engulfed in his broad chest. The long strands of his hair tickled my forehead as he hugged me back, and I could distinctly hear him inhaling my scent deeply. Alec and Cade were identical in nearly every way, but I had long ago noticed the subtle differences between the two. Cade was a bit bulkier than Alec, and Alec's muscles were just a tiny bit more defined. While both had a temper, Alex seemed to be more controlled. Cade had something dark about him, and he usually spoke less than Alec. "Sweetheart, you got flour all over me," he grunted, looking down at his black t-shirt that had now been turned grey. "Oh, sorry." I grinned sheepishly, turning a bit red in the face. The severity in his eyes cracked and faded until the real Cade came out to play, the side of him only Alec and I could see. His arms remained snaked around my waist, and I stiffened as his tongue darted out to lick my cheek. "You taste like pizza," he smirked, grasping my chin with one of his large hands before claiming my lips with his own. "Claire made one special for you and your brother." Their mom chimed in, leaning against the counter with what looked to be a soft grin on her face. "You did?" he asked, an eyebrow raised. His full lips turned up in one of his rare but genuine smiles. "Let's see it." I practically bounced over to the counter to show him what I had made. Their mom helped with the toppings, as I wasn't sure which ones they liked the most. Both of them seemed to favor completely different toppings. Half of the pizza was for Cade, and the other half for Alec. What shape is that?" Cade frowned, looking down at monstrosity of a pizza I had made. Working at Beth's had helped me make sure the dough was in an even layer, and that it was baked through entirely, but it did not help me make a perfect heart shape. Often, Beth took care of those extraneous details. "It's a heart." I frowned, pointing at the two misshapen arches of the heart. "See?" "Oh, I see." He cleared his throat somewhat awkwardly. His mouth remained open for a few minutes, like he couldn't figure out the correct words to say. It's horribly ugly, but it'll taste good." I grinned, holding back the laughter that bubbled up my lips. In the time I had known the twins, Cade was hardly ever rendered uncomfortable or speechless. In just a few minutes, I had brought on both. He was also not one for sweet words, but I seemed to bring out that hidden soft side of him. The lightest colored blush stained his cheeks, and I savored the image of a blushing Cade. "It's not ugly." He shook his head, pulling me into the protective warmth of his arms. "It's perfect, like my mate. Does everyone forget that I can feel emotions?" I snorted, a wide grin stretching across my face. Cade chuckled deeply before nodding, "All right, it's a little ugly. Well, I'm going to bring some food to your father." Cade's mom chimed in, giving us both an indulgent grin. "Don't worry about the mess, Claire. I'll clean up in a few." "You sure?" I frowned. "Positive. Now go, enjoy some time with Cade." She smiled, leaving the room with 2 plates of food in hand. "She's trying to give us some privacy," Cade murmured, his hands traveling down to my hips. "I figured as much." I replied with a dazed nod. "So, I heard you spent some time with my brother today." Cade's voice was thick and low. I could hear the hidden meaning in his words, and felt the surge of delicious emotion as it bubbled to the surface. My back hit the counter, but Cade made no move to retreat. Instead, he leaned in even closer, his lips just beside my ear. "I can smell him on you, sweetheart." "Oh!" I squeaked, my throat closing up as his nose trailed down my neck. I meant to shower." I wouldn't mind taking you like this." He purred, his tongue darting out to run up the length of my neck. "You taste good." "Funny," Alex said the same thing. I managed to mumble in between quiet gasps. "I wonder how you taste down there." His voice sent a jolt of longing through me, and I savored the soreness between my legs that had come from his brother just mere hours ago. "The pizza is incredible, but that's not what I'm hungry for. I want you splayed out like my own personal feast, sweetheart." With just a few words, Cade had turned me into a stammering mess. His fingers dug into my hips with just the right amount of pressure, sending those delicious sparks trickling between my legs. "I think I could go for a shower as well." He chuckled in my ear, scooping me into his arms and striding towards the stairs. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.